Have you ever had that moment where your intuition whispered something and your intellect argued back? And later you realize that your intuition was right the whole time. So here's the real question. Which one is smarter, your intuition or your intellect? Well, the answer may surprise you, so stick around until the end and you will know what the answer actually is. Hello, everybody. I am Vaishali Nikhade. I am an engineer turned psychic with over 9,000 readings, and I show you how you can leverage the power of the spirit, aka intuition, as well as the power of the stars in order to be able to create momentum in your life. Some of the smartest decisions that people make, they come due to the fact that intuition actually saw something even before the intellect caught up with what was happening. So here's what you're going to learn in this video. Your intellect needs evidence, intuition does not. Intuition sees energetic patterns that logic cannot compute. Intuition predicts momentum, logic only explains the past. And the missing puzzle where you can flex your muscles every week to make your intuition stronger. So let's get started. The first point is your intellect needs evidence, intuition does not. Your intellect is always going to demand proof because as soon as you come to a conclusion, you are looking for some sort of a proof that is going to either take you there or some sort of logic that is actually going to take you there to come to a reasonable conclusion. That is just how the intellect works. Intuition, on the other hand, is very, very different. It doesn't really need any proof. It just gives you the final answer and lets you imagine all the possibilities of how you could even come to that answer when in your logical mind it's not even feasible. But the more you play with intuition, the more you will understand what it is that I just said. So I'll give you a short story, and this is a long time back when I first started reading people. There was this lady who came to me and she was working with an investor for closing a real estate deal. And she calls me and she wanted to know if the deal was going to close in, I believe it was either 1 day or 2 days or something. And I told her that I didn't really see the deal closing for maybe over a week or even longer. And she started arguing with me. It wasn't really her, but it was more of her intellect. That, oh, this investor is involved in it, that is investor is involved in it, this investor has so much money, that investor has so much money. And I was like, I just don't see it closing. So that was the end of our conversation. And she came back a year later and she mentioned to me that, I don't know if you remember me, but I had come to you a year ago and you had mentioned that deal wouldn't close. And actually it didn't really close. So this is how your intuition is just going to give you the answer that the deal is not going to close. And your intellect is going to come up with like weird scenarios of how this can even happen. Because in her mind, it was like, this investor is involved, that investor is involved, and blah, blah, blah. So according to her, it had to close. So you can see how your intuition can supersede your intellect. And I have another video about how clairvoyance gave me a thrill ride. It is also about tapping into your intuition and how intuition can warn you about things in advance. So I'm going to link that in the comments below and you can watch that video as well to see how intuition tries to connect or communicate with you before anything even plays out in real life. So we move on to the next point, which is intuition sees energetic patterns which logic cannot compute. So as far as logic is concerned, it just operates in one way, which is logical, which is 2 and 2 will always add up to 4 kind of a scenario. But intuition is a little bit more subtle than that. The easiest example for this is I had a client, let's call her Anna, and she went out on a date with this guy, and she just asked him a yes or no question. The way he answered the question, her intuition already picked up that something was off. And when she read with me, I told her what was off. She found that out within a few days. But essentially, her intuition already picked up that the guy in front of her was not honest. He may say something from his mouth, which she wanted to hear, but the thing is, words can be deceiving, but it is very hard to deceive with energy. And intuition acts from an energetic standpoint. And because she picked up the energy, she knew something was wrong. So she came to me. I told her what was wrong. She went and verified that. But as far as the guy was concerned, he thought he could deceive with words. But maybe he did deceive with words, but his energy actually gave away the truth or kind of spilled the beans as to what was going on. And if you just look at logic and you just look at what he said, then you wouldn't have been able to kind of catch this thing early on, or she wouldn't have been able to cut her losses early on. So that is the magic of playing with your intuition or connecting with your intuition. And I'm going to show you how you can flex your intuitive muscles to make them stronger by introducing you to the Cosmic Chronicle, which is something I have developed after I was offered a $900 candle, but that's a story for a different video, which I will also share with you at the end of this video. All right, so we move on to the next point, which is intuition predicts momentum, logic only explains the past. So as far as logical conclusions are concerned, they are based on whatever way things have played out in the past. That because last time A led to B led to C, in the future also logic will say that A will lead to B and B will lead to C, kind of a scenario. However, intuition doesn't work that way. It actually reads the pattern of what is about to unfold. And there is a really crazy story of a client who came to me just before COVID, and she was worried about her job. So we tried to ask the question in a lot of different ways because the reading wasn't making sense and it wasn't adding up for me and it wasn't adding up for her either. And essentially, the way I had asked the question was if she would have her job, and then the answer showed up as a yes. However, she didn't feel comfortable, so she said that let's see if we can ask the question in another way. So I said, okay, will she be driving to work? And the answer was no. And she was like, I have to be at work in order to do the job. I said, well, this answer is a clear no. And then we went with a series of other questions and nothing was making sense. Essentially, what happened is after that COVID hit and she wasn't really driving to work, she was most likely working from home. But this is how intuition was predicting everything. But logic wasn't adding up because there had been no COVID before that. So all the results or all the predictions or whatever it is that I was seeing, it was accurate, but I wasn't able to point my finger and say that, oh yes, it is because COVID is happening. I was more concerned about answering her questions about her work, and essentially logic was not supporting a lot of the things because logic was based on the past that people drive to work. But COVID changed that. So this is how logic will work a lot of the times until it stops working. And this is the best scenario where you can leverage the power of intuition in order to be able to get ahead. So speaking of getting ahead, I move on to the next point, which is how you can flex your intuitive muscles in order to sharpen your intuition. So intuition is like a muscle, and the more you flex it, the easier it becomes for you to be able to access your intuition. And this is the reason I have developed what is known as the Cosmic Chronicle. And what the Cosmic Chronicle does is every week it gives you a prediction of what the week holds a promise for. And by playing with your intuition, you're kind of looking at the scenarios that play out in your life on a daily basis and see whether this is the scenario or this is the scenario or this is the scenario. And by doing that, you are sharpening your intuitive muscles. And once you start sharpening your intuitive muscles, essentially you're flexing them, not sharpening per se, but you're flexing your intuitive muscles. And the more you flex them, the better they get. And the better they get, essentially, it will lead to you sharpening your intuition. So the link to sign up for the Cosmic Chronicle is in the comments below. And when I first started reading people, or before I started reading people, I actually approached a lot of psychics. And there is a whole video on that. One of them offered me a $900 candle. And how that whole story played out, that is the subject of my next video. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye.